Good evening, everybody. It's cold outside. I guess not as cold as it was there before Christmas, and certainly not as snowy, but it's nice to have this opportunity to meet virtually so we don't have to go out and slug through the fog tonight. Glad you could join us. I see we've got like 48 folks out there. That's nice. These programs that we have tonight, the members shop tours, have always been real popular, and I'm looking forward to what we see tonight. Just as a note, when we meet live in person, Mr. Richard Tendick does our door prizes, does a really great job of that, shopping around. We get a lot of good stuff out. Of course, we haven't figured out a way to stuff that stuff through the internet cord. So like we have done in past, when this meeting concludes, Mr. Mike Johnson over there will download a list of participants and randomly select 5 people from that list who have attended for like more than 15 minutes. We do put kind of a timeline on it. Those cursory viewers just they kind of lose out. Anyway, he'll pick 5 of those and they'll each get a $50 gift card. I think we're going with Rockler this time. And he'll send that to you by US mail. The one thing I wanted to talk about tonight, as far as business goes, is if you go to our website and go to the homepage and click that menu item up there at the top that says About, and if you read what the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild is about, amongst all the text, you'll see there's 3 bullet points. And one of the bullet points is to educate ourselves and others about woodworking and the quality of woodworking and what it can provide to people's lives. And to that end, we've got we have several programs in place that we run on a regular basis that are aimed at educating. One of those is the tuition grant program, which we revitalized here a couple years ago. And, we give a $1,000 grant to each of 2 of our members during the year who apply for that. And that's been a popular program in the last few years. We've had some really interesting members' experiences. One of the criteria for granting that is the recipients have to spend some time at one of our general meetings and explain their experience going to the class or the recognized master that they visited, and fill everybody in about their experience. And we've had one of those already, and we have another one coming up here in a future meeting in the near future. The tuition grant program is still open for applications, and it will be until the 15th. In a few days here, we'll send out another reminder that there's we'll do that 2 weeks before it closes. And we do have a number of participants so far, and I can tell the board of directors that your job is going to be a little tough this year, trying to pick from the ones who have already applied. Another thing we do to educate ourselves and others is annually we put on the Northern Woods exhibition. Now, a lot of people think it's just a brag show. It is. There's a certain amount of that's a brag show, but it is an excellent opportunity for all the members of the Guild to meet other members and take a look at what they've done, take a look at how they've done it, talk to them. And we get to meet, hundreds and hundreds of spectators who accidentally happen to stop by because they're in the shopping mall. And every once in a while, we'll find 1 or 2 who actually came there on purpose because they've visited us every year for the last 30 or 29 years, whatever the number is. So anyway, that's another educational opportunity. And then the one that is more blatantly educational is our annual fall seminar, which has been going on for a lot of years. It's a 2.5-day event. We get to meet. We bring in outstanding, nationally renowned woodworkers, and they take us through something that they know and try to teach us in a working environment, with real machine tools and sawdust and the whole works. And that's been a very popular event. This year, attendance was down below what we usually experience. So we did send out a survey to our membership to get a feel for why people didn't come. And of course, there's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that showed up quite often, and it's also a reason that people don't enter pieces in our Northern Woods exhibition, is they feel that the level of education that we plan to present at these is at such a high level, it exceeds their level of woodworking, and it kind of scares them away. So we've been talking about, well, gee, maybe we need to do something to present some sort of a structured program that teaches lower levels of skills. And we started talking about that at our board meeting in December. Then here late in December, ever since we went to our new website in September, we get a monthly report of activity, how many people have visited it and where they visited. And I've been following that along, but over the first 2 months, it didn't mean a whole lot. But I took a look at it this last month in December, 3 months worth of usable statistics. And we were surprised. We've had over 1,600 Google hits on our website in the last 3 months. Almost half of them were from people who were looking for some sort of a class or a lesson or a place to learn about woodworking. So this month we talked about that at our board meeting. We just had a board meeting last night. And it really inspired us to think harder about, well, what could we do? Now, we know of several guilds around the country who have been very fortunate, mostly through benefactors that are associated with the guild, that are very philanthropic, and they have given them brick and mortar facilities and funds to start up, a home. Well, Minnesota Woodworkers Guild doesn't have that. But they also have been able to institute a bunch of, classes and safety training and lots of other things. And we're thinking that, well, maybe there's a way that we could do that without a brick and mortar facility. There are facilities around the Twin Cities area. Many of them are supporters of the Guild who have workshops in which perhaps we could hold some sort of a class, or perhaps a one-day seminar on basic woodworking techniques or the like. And the entire board is in favor of that. There's only 9 members on the board. And, we have other activities. We have a big Woodworkers Expo that takes a lot of manpower. And it turns out that we don't have the bandwidth on our board of directors right now at this point to put together some other kind of a basic skills training program. So I want to reach out to all of you, 62 of you out there now, and I'll bet one of you at least has thought that, gee, I've got some skills that I have and it came by me, by hard knocks, and I would like the opportunity to make this kind of an education available to a lot of other people. Not to say that this person needs to actually conduct a seminar, but we're looking for somebody who has a passion for woodworking and for helping others learn about woodworking, to help us organize some kind of a program that we could put together and serve that purpose to our membership and to the general public. So that's my plea to you. Please contact me. Go to our homepage, hit the About button, the About menu item up there. Go down and hit Contacts or hit the Leadership tab, and you can see my phone number, and you can send me a message over our messaging system there. And tell me that you're interested in talking about trying to help us put something together. We really would appreciate that a lot. Okay, so we covered, that's about all the business that we need to cover. So I'm going to turn it over to the program committee, and we can get on with these really greatly promised shop tours. Thanks, folks.
So just a little FYI, so we're gonna play the videos one at a time. At the end of each video, we've got time set aside about 5 minutes for a Q&A after each one. So feel free to post your questions on the chat function and we will try and get to as many of those as we can in that 5 minutes. So Matt, take it away.
Good evening. The first video we're going to see is for Finne's shop. Probably many of you already know Os. He's been around the guild for a little while, and if you're at a meeting or an event, Os is usually there helping out to make sure things go according to plan, or as best we can to plan. He became active in the guild and retired about 8 years ago from being a doctor of surgery. And I guess instead now he's concentrating on cutting on wood rather than people. His shop, I think, is a good example of trying to make use of as much as you can in the space that you have. Like a lot of us probably have a limited amount of space, and we want to figure out how we can get as much out of that space as possible. And Os has a lot of stuff in his shop, and I think he makes good use of it. He's even got a hoist in his shop, as you'll see, which is pretty cool. So, all right, let's take a look at Os's shop.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm Os Finne, and welcome to my shop. I bought this house in about 1983, I'm sorry, 1986, and primarily because it had a 4-car garage with 2 stalls in line with the other stalls. So it gives me basically a 2-stall workshop for my shop, and then 2 stalls for the cars. I store the wood on either side. The sheet goods I put on this. So that's where I keep my sheet goods. I can pull the little things out, and then the bigger things, it'll hold a full 4x8 sheet of plywood. Move that. There we go. And then my lumber I have on this side. I basically made a rack with 4x4s and pipe. The 4x4s have holes spaced at intervals in which I can fit pipes and move shelves up or down, or take shelves away if I need it. So I have a steam box, a little one and a big one, which I've tried but not very successfully. And as you can see, I've got some various different woods. Most of the wood I got, walnut and cherry, I got from a friend of my father's in the early 1970s. He floored his barn with it. He cut down a bunch of trees on his farm and didn't have a place to put it, so he floored his barn at it. And this was sitting in a mud pile outside the barn, and he gave it to me. So I've hauled this stuff all around the United States after 12 years in the Army, but it's a nice Virginia air-dried walnut and cherry, and I'm gradually using up as the years go by. I have a Powermatic lathe that I bought in San Antonio when I was stationed in the Army in the 1970s. No, actually 1960s. And I use it. The only problem I have is that I have to move both cars out of the garage when I use it. But otherwise, it's been very satisfactory, and I've done a few things, but I haven't used it as much as I maybe should. I also have a metal lathe. It's an old smithy that I got when they first came out. It's kind of a combination milling machine and lathe, and I use it a lot for all kinds of little trinkets and things. And actually, I made some guides for a bandsaw with it, some guide holders, and they work better than the originals on the machine. So that's a very useful thing to have in the shop. And for small pieces of wood, you can also turn small pieces of wood with it as well. Last year, I built a new workbench out of lumber reclaimed from my grandfather's old workbench, which is over there, which meant I had to move my bought workbench over here. And this is an old Joburg that I got from Woodcraft. It served me quite well, but it's you know, it's got it's an okay bench. My work table and my assembly table is here, and basically it's built on top of an old set of Sears cabinet drawers. And one of the things I'm most proud of is my overhead gantry, as you can see up there. And I thought I made a new bonnet for my dust collector. I had for my planer. This one hooked up to my vacuum cleaner, but the design flaw in this was these supports. And they always collected dust and tended to clog up. So I made a new one actually this week, and I'm going to connect it to my regular dust collection system, which you can see runs around the ceiling. The main dust collecting machine is actually outside. I cut a hole in the wall and built a little cubicle on the outside of the garage that will hold the main dust collector. Anyway, the idea is I can connect this to my main dust collection system, and I won't have to empty my vacuum cleaner so often. But one of the things I was proud of is this gantry, and I'll show you how useful it is. This weighs about 285 pounds, and I simply hook it up to the electricity, and I can move this off. Move this all the way over. And then let it down. And everything in my shop is on wheels except for the old workbench and this one work table. So I can simply move things around and put it back and store it under my workbench. Where it normally goes. But the gantry allows me to do things like that, which would be impossible otherwise. And it also allowed me to build also allowed me to build my new workbench, actually on top of the old workbench. So, and I actually put a new shelf in my new workbench by moving it up on top of this table a couple of weeks ago. The workbench itself weighs about 350 pounds. So the gantry really worked well for that sort of thing. I'm kind of proud of my new workbench. It has a Moxon vise. This is a twin turbo vise it's made by Incline, Andy Klein, and so I don't have to worry about it racking. Okay, now I'm really proud of my workbench that I built out of reclaimed lumber from my grandfather's old workbench. So this lumber, I remember going to the mill in roughly 1964 or so, and buying the wood with my grandfather, and he built his own workbench, which was not really a woodworker's workbench. So I took it apart and rebuilt a real workbench out of it. And as you can see here, I put Andy Klein's twin turbo vise on it. It's a Moxon vise, and I like it because it doesn't rack, but it has two settings. It's got a fast opening setting, and then a more powerful slow setting that you can use. It'll open to almost 18 inches, and it won't rack because it's got two screws. So it's actually a very nice vise. It's a little bit stiff, but it works well, and I lined it with leather. As you can see, I like square dogs. I made square dogs, and I put a bench-crafted wagon vise in it, which allows me to put things between them, and it's a true European-style workbench. I really like it. It's a split-top Roubo, and the centerpiece will come up, and I can flip it over, and it will protrude about a half and 3/4 to a half an inch, and I can use that as a stop if I need to. And the the outside parts are glued, and the inner parts are not glued, so the wood can move in and out. And as a matter of fact, I had to plane this to loosen it up because over the summer with the hot, moist weather, it swelled a little bit. But it's been very, very satisfactory, and I really like it. I made the base out of ash, and which is wood I've got from Seawick's lumber, and I put a shelf in the bottom as well. And this is on rollers as well, so I can roll it around if I need to. My current project is a miter jack, which I got the idea from when I made my workbench. It was so big and heavy that the only way I could figure to cut the legs the same length because the floor is slightly uneven in the shop, was to use a miter saw, which I made. Made my own miter saw out of a Japanese saw, and I put this on the ground and cut all the way around on the bottom posts. Basically, if you cut all the way around, then you've got a saw kerf that you can use to saw the legs off with a handsaw, which is what I did. And that gave me the miter jack gave me the idea of making a miter jack, to use the hand tools to cut shoulders on tenons And this particular model, I benchcrafted advertised plans for. So I basically copied, and it's based on an old French miter jack that they somehow got their hands on. And anyway, it's capable of 90-degree angle here, a 45-degree angle here. I haven't finished that part, and a 22.5-degree angle here. So basically, a screw. This is a test screw. I was learning to set up my screw box and learn the proper settings, and essentially this will screw into this part of the jack, and then it'll move this movable piece back and forth like that. So you can open and close it, and once it's finished, the 45-degree angle will come down about halfway here and correspondingly up through here. But of course that means learning to make screws out of wood, and also learning how to precisely size round stock, which I've played around and finally came up with a design for making an 1.25-inch dowel. And I've basically turned some pieces. This is the handle, and there's a piece in here soaking in mineral oil that I will turn, and I learned that if you soak things in mineral oil first, it gives a much cleaner screw with no tear out. So that's what this was, a test piece for that, which fit in this one. And so I made a piece. I had an extra piece of oak. I made another one out of just to play with the lathe, because I haven't used a skew in a long time. And I plan to turn the screw on this piece to fit between here and here in the near future. The best way to cut threads that I've come across is with the Dieter Schmidt screw box. I've tried several others, including the Beal tool threader, and I find that so finicky that I've settled on this as the best way to cut them. The problem is, if you buy a screw box, you have to have the corresponding tap. Otherwise, the threads don't exactly match. So, and I bought this, and one thing I like about this particular tap is the long non-threaded portion that fits in the hole. It means you're absolutely straight when you go in and start to cut the threads. So that's my workbench and the one future project. I also have a router table that I've this is basically a rocker table that I put a bunch of shelves in. As you can see here, I've got all kinds of storage space here. And I was trying to teach myself to do finger joints. As you can see, it has a bunch of them. I have virtually everything I've got is on wheels. My main bandsaw is this old Powermatic, which I keep on wheels and move out to use it. I've got little sleds that fit on it, and it'll connect to the dust collecting system as well, which I have connected through this long piece. And I also, many years ago, bought a Japanese resaw saw. This piece is interesting because the blade is 3 inches wide. And for many years I was very unhappy with this because it wouldn't cut a straight line. Then I finally figured out that the guides on it were not very good. And so I made my own set of guides out of a block of aluminum. And then once I got a stable guide, I found this saw actually works very well for sawing stuff that's 12 inches or so. So this is also on wheels and moves around, and I have used it this little jig here to make cookies out of logs for my daughter-in-law to do wood burning with. So that's the reason for this funny looking jig. I have a 6-inch jointer which I keep under the bench, as most things are on rollers. It's also connected to the dust collection system and has a blast gate which I control there, and it's been a solid old jointer. In order to keep things from moving around when I'm using it, I have these catches that I put on the floor, and so it doesn't move and scoot around when I'm using it. And the very first tool that I bought when I was a youngster was a radial arm saw from Sears, and that's been basically my chop saw for years. When I didn't have a table saw, I used it for ripping and everything. I'm sure what I did in my early youth would not be considered very safe nowadays, but it's been a good instrument. And this saw and the table saw have the same motor. They're both 220, and so everything's pretty much interchangeable as far as the blades and blades go. So, and that's also, as you can see, connected to the dust connection system as well. So that's kind of Finne's shop. And one of the first things I did when I moved into my garage is build shelves all the way. This is one of my projects that's been ongoing for about 3 years or so. I built a chest of drawers to fit in my bedroom to replace a bunch of plastic ones that are there, and there's a very confined space that it'll fit into. And I got hung up on the legs because I want to do beads on and turn the legs. But when I did the test cuts, I got so many catches with my skew, I decided I better practice a little bit first. And that's so because of the fear of messing these legs up, which have lots of mortises in them and it would be hard to replace, I decided I would do a lot more practice before I risked taking it apart. So this is not glued together yet, and after I get it all glued together, then I'll do the drawers. But this is also cherry from the original, from that original stock that I got, and the top is here, also glued together from one of those panels, and so that's the two current projects are the miter jack and the chest of drawers.
We've got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
One is that the assuming that the dust collector vents outside, does that affect the heat in your shop during the winter?
The cubicle that I built is insulated and airtight, so it essentially is part of the heated space.
And then another one is the gantry bolted to the ceiling?
Yes, it's lag screws that go into the ceiling joists.
And then I think the last one I see is how do you heat your garage?
Say again.
How do
How do I heat it?
Yeah,
I have it's a gas, basically an overhead furnace, and it's just a standard heater. I had one of the local heating companies install it probably 30 years ago.
Okay, I think that's
If I had to do it over again, I would probably put in a mini split air conditioner or heat pump so that it would cool it in the summer and when it gets so hot and humid, and also I would suppose that it would be able to heat it adequately in the winter. I don't know.
yeah. I think that's all the questions, Mike.
Okay. All right. Next up, we have Bruce Kieffer. Bruce has been a long time guild member, and we're going to show you his shop. It's a pretty nice one. So here we go.
Here's the story of our house. My brother-in-law owned a house and he passed away. He left the house to my wife. Originally, it was just that section up to where the service door is there on the garage. There was a garage. It was damaged. It needed to be replaced, so they took that down. But my goal was that when you drive down the road, you wouldn't know that there was a large shop attached to this house. And the house was 1,000 square feet. The shop floor is 1,500 feet. So you can see from here, just looks like a normal everyday house. So this is 2 stories. Where the block is, I have a storage room, and above that is the shop. And you can see how big this is, but you can't see it from the street, and that was the goal. So, one thing that I had a shop on 7th Street that I shared with another person when I first started, and we had a nice picture window out in the front. And then my shop on University, which some of you folks probably remember because I used to give demonstrations for the guild there on University. But it had 2 windows that were in the back. I'm missing one shop that was in the middle. I was on Ford Parkway for 10 years. It had 0 windows. So when I moved here, windows were the key. Now, we're going to pan and see the 7 windows in my shop. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th one over there. Now my office is there. The height of the ceiling here is 9.5 feet. Which is really nice for the shop. That's why there's the ramp over there that you saw. And that goes out to the garage. There's storage in the garage I used to use it for when I build cabinets and furniture for companies. And I just store it out there. When I'd finish a component or something, it would go out there, and then I'd move it from there to the job site. Now, recently I built this lumber rack. There was a lot of discussion on the guild community board, if you want to call it that, or the whatever the board is, the discussion board, about how to have lumber storage. The first lumber rack I built was functional and it worked great, but it was designed to be in a garage because that's what I had in my shop on Ford Parkway. It was a garage, and then that was attached, the commercial building, but attached to another space. But that's how you entered and exited the shop, was through the garage. So there was a very similar size lumber rack that was, everything had to go in and out, slide in and out this way, and I knew that was a mistake. But, what do you do? Then when we started having that discussion on the guild site about how to store lumber, there was the discussion about storing it horizontally, vertical, but the key was to have access to it like I do here. Everything can get taken off this way rather than slide it in and out. I can move it up and down if I need to. I have quite a bit of lumber on here, which is, I don't need it, but it will eventually get used up. But this was a design that I had thought about for 45 years, drew it for 2 years. I was working on the design drawing for 2 years, and it took me 5 weeks in June and July, I think it was, this year, to finally construct it. I created a slideshow movie that's on YouTube. And if you just search for me, Bruce Kieffer, Kieffer, on YouTube, you will see the slideshow, which is interesting because it's the deconstruction of the old lumber rack and then the reconstruction of the new lumber rack. Most all of these boards and the particle board was all part of the old lumber rack. So I have storage here for sheet goods. This worked out real good. I didn't know that this was going to be this good, but for the smaller, narrower pieces of sheet goods, probably have too much storage up above there, but you know, I keep my shorter pieces of lumber up in here organized. There's no such thing in my mind as scrap wood. It always will have a purpose. You can always use it for something, even if it's to burn in the fireplace. So we're going to give you a brief tour of the machines that I have in my shop. You can see the 60-gallon vertical compressor that I have there. You know, and I bought that local, cast air. It's a real nice machine, does a great job. I've got a Oneida dust gorilla here. All of the pipes for the dust collection are underneath the floor. I have a crawl space here. I've got a storage room over there. Everything goes underneath, which is very nice because when you look at the shop, it's clean. There aren't a lot of pipes up above. So that works well. Then let me take you over here. Key element, if you can do it in a shop, have a sink if you're going to build your shop. This is wonderful to be able to clean things up, wash your hands in the sink here. This cabinet, my miter saw station, was built some years ago on my shop on University Avenue, towards the end of when I had my shop there. But it's a lot of good storage. I've got drawers, I've got cabinets, and a miter saw. Now, one thing is, if you can get a close-up of this was something that I had to design. Chris Marshall from Woodworkers Journal had done a story on a miter saw station. He didn't include this. I designed it afterwards. But you can adjust this with these knobs. That plate lifts this up. Why is that important? Because this height from here to here, or this is wood, by the way, so it changes dimensions over the year, and you need to be able to adjust it. So that allows you to adjust it. It's very fine-tuned. It's a nice thing. Anybody ever wants to know how that's done, just ask me. I can give you some plans on how to do that. So then let's take a look over here. These are the basic machines that I bought when I started off. I bought this from G.C. Peterson, 13-inch Rockwell planer. This was the planer that was in every class, high school shop class. You know, that's what you'd see that. In my generation, that's what they had. 12-inch crescent jointer. This was something some friend of my dad's had in their garage. Okay, so my dad tells me about it, and I go, yeah, I need that. But Dad, I don't have the money. So he said, it was $550 back then, and that was in 1978, I think. And there's a head grinding attachment, which is really nice because I can grind the knives without removing them. and sharpen them. Even if you need to lift them, you can lift them and then you sharpen them into the circle, the cutting circle. It works great. So that's the story with that. I've got a Supermax drum sander. We'll talk more about this later. And table saw, unisaw. You can see the guard setup that I created. So it's kind of a modified, they had an arm that went around, I can't remember what they called it, the uniguard or something. But I modified this so it came down from the ceiling. It's nice, everything's clear. If you need to cut larger panels, it works really good. I've got a sliding table attachment. This is a great tool. If you can get something like this, I can cut, I can't cut 48-inch wide on it, but 36 inches. So every panel that's made, you know, for a cabinet, say a base cabinet or something, can get cut on here. And the beauty is it's square. It is right on, dead on square. And there's the fences up here. You know, so I love that. And other than that, you know, I've got an edge sander. I've got a 6x48 sander, a radial arm saw. This is kind of a throwback. You know, very few people have these today or would buy them today, but it's a nice tool. I use it. Underneath this, I've got a grass eco press, they call it. I'm not going to undo it much, but what this is a hinge boring machine and a line boring machine. Grass gave me a super deal on it when I bought it. I'm pretty sure that even 25 years later, I still haven't recovered my initial investment. I don't get enough use out of it. But when I'm doing cabinets, it's fantastic because you can drill all the holes and it's got stop arms and stuff like that. And it's jump, 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 done. And it drills the hinge cup holes for these things, for the European hinges. I don't use that style anymore. I use a different one, but it works really good. Router table. Again, this is a tool I quite don't understand. The router table, I built this as a project for Woodworkers Journal a long time ago. Cover story, you know, it's a router table. I use it rarely. I can't remember the last time I used it. If I have to choose between using a handheld router or a router table, I'm going to use a handheld router because I can climb cut. You can't do that on a router table. Got a State spindle sander. I don't think this is a tool you could buy today. There's a lot of other spindle sanders. This is an old one. It does a really nice job. Oscillates, goes up and down, turns at the same time. Table will tilt. I use that quite a bit. Got a Delta scroll saw. I think the interesting thing is if you can, Dan, move back and see those feet, this thing would hop around like crazy, okay? And it's just like there's too much weight up here relative to the stand. And I think I put something out on the guild board asking, you know, how is it some problem with the tool, you know, and I tore it apart and I looked at it. No, it isn't. It's just inherent. And this thing is going up and down and gyrating. Let's see if we can do it. Uh-oh, can't do that anyway. Don't have this locked down. Anyway, I find these things on eBay. And it's somebody here local who sold them out in Maple Grove. And they're isolation feet. And that solved the problem. So if you have problems with tools, machines jumping around on you, try some isolation feet. I've got a sharpening station here. I can move this around. I got a dolly. I lift this or push this down, slide it over. Wheels come down. It locks in. I can roll this thing around. I've got a Tormek back there, a grinder here. Old drill press. There's another tool my dad bought for me. He bought this and that 6x48 sander for $125 back in 1978. Thank you, Dad. This I highly recommend a tool like this for anybody who's doing woodworking. Dust extraction system. Make all of your sanders hook up with this. I don't have my routers hooked up with this. It's kind of difficult enough holding the router, but the sanders, it's easy enough, and it just keeps the shop so much cleaner. That's a great tool. A workbench here. This again was a project that was built for American Woodworker, where we actually, there's 6 sections here. The one that we did for them, they didn't need one that was that long, 12 foot long. So theirs is 3 sections, where it's a cabinet, then a tool section and a cabinet, same thing down below. And it's a great tool. I've got 25 drawers here, they're all full, okay? I've got a nice traditional workbench that I built in 1993. It's a bird's eye maple top because I had some bird's eye maple left over, but I rarely use it that way. It's just a work table. I can take this Homosote off, and expose the work table. You can see it's nice looking, but I don't use it that way. It's got dogs in it. I just don't do that kind of work. Beautiful. Always wanted to have a nice workbench. I do, but I keep it covered. So I think, as you can see, I'm kind of a clean freak. It's in my genes, right? And my mom was a clean freak. I actually won this little blower as for a tip that I submitted. What do they call it? The chop trick tip or something. I can't remember if they call it Woodworkers Journal, but I received this as a compensation for that, along with some money, thank God. And, they tell me I'm going to get this little blower. I've got the big one for outside, that's great. But I'm thinking, what do I need this thing for? Well, let me tell you, this tool is great. I can go and blow down low and move the dust around underneath me. Yeah, I still want to wear a mask and run my dust collector, but it keeps everything pretty low, and you can direct it around. And great tool for cleaning the shop. M12, Milwaukee M12, compact blower they call it. It's nice. Now, I always get accused of maybe I don't have enough clamps, but I'm pretty sure I do have enough clamps. I have had all the clamps in play at one time when I built my desk, which is in my office, and I did the veneer job on there. I had pretty much every clamp used to hold down the cross barriers and the battens to keep the veneer down, to glue it down. So those are cowls for veneering. I haven't done any veneering for a while though, but that's what they're used for. They're just curved boards, so you can clamp on the outside and you're applying pressure on the inside. Whole nother story about veneering. But anyway, clamps. And I've got a Mini Max bandsaw. This has always been a good one for me. I raised it up a little bit so it's a little easier to work here. I mean, you can imagine if it's down, it's about here without the base that I put on there. That's a little low. This is a good height, easy to see. One of the other things that was asked is about heat and air conditioning. Well, when I did the shop, that was a big question as to what was going to be done for heat and air conditioning. And we went around and around with different heating contractors about what to do. I needed it to be separate from the house. They couldn't do it anyway because the furnace and the air conditioner for the main house wouldn't handle. That was for 1,000 square feet. We had another 1,500. You needed a whole nother system. One guy was talking about a boiler system because we were worried about air, forced air, moving it around. and you know, and the dust going through the system. That was a question. Then we talked about mini splits, which were things that went on the outside, and they just kind of cycled air from the shop out and exhausted the heat. It was like a little air conditioner heat pump in a unit. You put a couple of them on there, you know. And then my dad had already passed away at that time, but I swear to God, he's on my shoulder and he's going, "Sonny," because he always called me Sonny. "Sonny, why are you wasting your time? Put in a forced air system. It'll be fine." So that's what we did, and it's been perfectly fine. I have filters on the cold air returns, so that's taking out a lot of the dust. The contractor put in a giant filter, you know, down at the unit itself. What is it, a 4 by 25 by 25, something like that filter, and that takes out the rest of the dust. This gets most of it, and I clean these out occasionally, and that gets the rest. I change that filter like once a year. It's not a cheap filter, it's about $30, but not a big deal. And it's really been great. And so I have heat and air conditioning, which originally with the boiler I was not going to have air conditioning. And that was one of the other reasons why we went with forced air, because you can't get decent air conditioning any other way other than forced air. The mini pumps, or the mini, is that what they call it? The mini, can't remember. The mini things on the walls, they weren't really considered great air conditioners. They're like, kind of like what's in a hotel, you know, if you wanted air conditioning, one of those things under a window. Mini splits is what they call them. Anyway, this is the way to go, forced air. And it's been very comfortable out here. I think the only thing, if I could do it again, I would change, I would have them put more heat down below. They called that conditioned space down below. It was something with the code. You have to put some heat down there. Problem is, it's not enough heat down there because the floor gets cold in the wintertime. So I wear wool socks and insulated shoes out here. That solves that problem. But if I could do it over again, I'd tell the contractor actually heat that completely down there. You know, there's no such thing as lost heat. It goes somewhere. If you put it down there, it eventually comes up here. So that's it. Now let's talk about the, you know, like, what is my favorite tool? This Supermax drum sander. I got a single drum here. I used to have a double drum. Not sure the value of the double drum. I had it, but their thinking was you'd put like 80 on one and 120 on the other. But once you start using this machine, you realize that it's not just a one-pass machine. So you have to make repetitive passes. So you're sanding 120, 180, and then the next time you come, you're sanding 120 again, and then 180. It makes no sense. So I just said, I don't need to spend the money. When I moved over here, the first one I had was 3-phase. This one is single-phase. So I needed to convert, and I sold that one, bought this one. And I said, nah, there's just no need for a double drum. In fact, when I used to do with the other one with the double drum, same grit on both. That way I was actually sanding more in each pass. But this machine is used on everything. The rest of the machines may be used on, what, 50%? But this machine is used, everything I do goes through this machine. I can fine-tune a thickness of anything, and it sands everything nicely. There's a little bit of chatter, but that can be taken care of with a belt sander, handheld belt sander, or I have a 6-inch random orbit sander. That can take care of those things pretty quick. But I would tell Supermax, I said, you ought to promote this better, because I can't imagine how you can be a woodworker without one of these machines. Okay, I'm pretty sure a lot of you don't have them, fine, but this is the workhorse of my shop, okay? I take for granted the planer and the joiner as tools that if you're going to be a woodworker and do a lot of woodworking, those are things you need. This is probably something that everybody thinks is a luxury, and it may be, but this thing pays for itself really quickly in the work it does. All right, so Dan just asked me about eye protection. Well, I forgot, I've got these. And these are fabulous. If you have any kind of a correction, these are no-line, progressive, bifocal safety glasses. See how they're, so I'm pretty well protected. Now, they also have another component to them which goes inside, which they call the gasket. And that will seal it up even more. So if you're doing something really nasty, you put the gasket on, and that just closes everything off. These were $204. That's cheap for a pair of prescription glasses. rxsafety.com is where I got them. I noticed lately Zenni also has safety glasses. You know, there's different frames or stuff. You know, out in the shop, you have to be stylish. Nah, not really. This is functional. All right, then Dan, you want to know about hearing protection? You know, earmuffs. You know, very, very important in the shop. A dust mask if you're doing anything dusty. I have dust masks. FastCap makes a real nice one. MX Pocket Mask. I like it because it goes this way. That being said, thank you, COVID made me absolutely hate wearing a mask, but still out in the shop, you got to do it.
That doesn't fog up your glasses?
No, the MX one doesn't. It's a good one. Here. What do they call it? MXV Pocket Dust Mask. And they're real nice. You couldn't get them for a while because everybody was shut down on selling masks because all the masks were going for COVID. But that's how it is. So it's very nice this way. And it doesn't qualify as a COVID-friendly mask, though, because it's got the vents going out on it. Well, let's hope we never have to go through that COVID stuff again. All right, I wanted to point this out. I have a switch here with a light. Now, when I turn that on, that indicates that the compressor is turned on. Now, why is this important? Well, many, many years ago, when my shop was on University Avenue, I come in the morning, I try and use the compressor, I've got nothing. Now, why is that? Because a hose popped in the middle of the night, and the compressor ran all night, and it burned out the motor. So, I want to know visually if I have my compressor power on or off. One thing I want to point out about this is if the compressor is running, you want to wait to turn it off until it stops running. You never want to stop the power going to the compressor when it's trying to move the pistons up and down and there's air on those pistons. You know, you always hear at the end of the cycle, you know, whoosh, that's air draining off of the top of the cylinders. So you want to make sure that it's done with its compression, and then you can turn it off. So a lot of times I forget to turn this off, but at night I can see this blue light glowing. I go, oops, time to go out there and turn that off. Let me go back to the heat system, because there is one thing that if I could do it differently, I would do it. And I'm just telling you this for a warning. When you have the forced air system, there is the return air. So it has to take the air out of here, take it to the furnace, heat it, bring it back. Okay, that's fine until you do something that has a lot of odor. Now, I don't finish anything up here with spraying or lacquer or anything. I use water base and I put it on with a foam brush, and that has a tiny bit of odor, but it's imperceptible. But I did do something with some spray cans. I had to refinish something with some spray cans. There became a problem that I found out that we should have done differently when we designed this thing. The return air is one complete system. In other words, the office and the shop are all pulling return air at the same time. The office and the shop are zoned separately for the heat or the air conditioning. So I can heat this separate from that. But the air that's being taken into the system is pulled from both. Now, if I could do it, and I'm not sure you can do this, if you could zone the return, then you could control odor staying in this zone and not going into that zone. So, in other words, when I spray finished out here, the office stunk like spray finish.
Okay, got
So we were talking about, drawer construction, and I just wanted to point out that when I started off making cabinets, I always did a pinned rabbet joint for a drawer, and it worked just fine. And I was reluctant to use dovetails. But over time, I did a story about different dovetail machines, comparing the different dovetail machines. I don't remember who I did that for, but after doing that, I realized that it's actually, once you understand how to do it, this is actually a more efficient way to make a drawer with a dovetail. And it certainly is a much better looking drawer that people appreciate a lot more. And it's just a dovetail machine. I have a nice Woodhaven jig here. You need to have a good jig. I keep this thing set up. I have notes everywhere on it telling me what the dimensions are. I have drawings on my computer that tell me the different sizes. I actually have a template somewhere where I've marked what is the drawer height and the pin positions and stuff like that. But the point being that I won't make a drawer today without using dovetails, because they look great, like I say, they function great. Once you get the machine set up and the jig set up, it works really good. One thing I would point out is that the bit works so much better if you have the bearing on the bit rather than using a guide, a bushing guide on your router, one of these. This is much more accurate. And the reason is that these are never, no matter how good you center these things within the base, they're never perfect. And if you are using a guide, you have to remember to keep your hands exactly the same. If you start turning the router, you're changing the center of where that bit is. And then things get really messed up. That's why I like the bearing system a whole lot better. So that's a good tip there. Other than that, I think that's about it. I hope you all enjoyed the tour of my shop. Anybody has any questions, contact me. If you saw something you want a little more detail about, I can tell you about it. And thank you, I suppose.
We had a couple questions, but Bruce answered them mostly in the chat, or in the video actually itself. One was about where he does finishing, and is he concerned about doing that around the gas flame? And he answered that in the video. And then the other one is how much do you have to fiddle with the drum sander? And Bruce answered that in the chat. He said that it has no problems. It's solid. And so I don't see any other questions for Bruce right now, Mike.
Okay, we're gonna be playing Drew Hofler's, and in the video, Dan Burks will do the introduction. So getting ready to start that here in a second.
We are here in Lino Lakes at Drew Hofler's shop. Drew has been a member of the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild for about a year. He has lived in Minnesota since 2011. He migrated from Pennsylvania. He's got a very elaborate and clean shop here, and I've seen some of his works, and they are beautiful. So, hand it over to Drew.
Hey everybody, my name is Drew, as Dan said, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to show you my shop. I'm new to the Woodworkers Guild, been in about a year, and decided a good way to get to know some people was to volunteer to show off the shop, so that's cool. Looked at some of the other shops that were on the videos from the last couple of years, and a little bit intimidated by some of those. Those are some really awesome shops, but I'll show you what some of my challenges were and the way I solved that. I updated my shop last year. I retired from my work as a vice president of a software company and marketing division, and was going to build an outbuilding that attached to my house, build an addition just for my shop, but that was when normally $7 OSB sheathing, roof sheathing, was 35 bucks a sheet. So the estimate came in very, very high. So I decided to do this to my 3-car garage instead. So the challenges that I'm facing really are the issues of a 3-car garage, right? So I have one car that has to stay in the garage. That's my wife's car, of course. Happy wife, happy life. But she was gracious enough to gift me everything that I could fit around that car. And so I've tried to make the best of it. But when you're working in a garage, a couple of things that you have to deal with. Obviously, one is lighting. I had your standard naked bulb in the middle of the space as my only lighting for a long time, and obviously that's no good. So I added on these LED strips. They look like fluorescents, but they're actually LED strips, 99 bucks at Home Depot each, and man, what a difference they make. So I really enjoy that. Painted all the walls white. So they were just raw drywall, painted them white, and the reflective light off of that just is really nice. Even in the depth of winter, this is a really, really nice shop. And I worked in this shop I had one car space without any flooring, without any extra lighting, and I'd move a car out and everything's on mobile bases. I did that for about 10 years. And then when I had this opportunity to invest a little bit when I retired into making this more of a shop, now it's how you see it now. The other thing that I had to deal with right after 10 years of working in a lightly heated shop on a concrete floor was how could I insulate the floor a little bit and make it a lot easier on my knees, which are certainly not as young as they used to be, right? So I put in this stuff called dry core, which is 2x2 squares of sandwiched OSB on the top, about 3/4 inch of OSB tongue and grooved around the outside edge, and about 3/4 inch of rigid foam insulation on the bottom that has channels in it for moving moisture on a cement floor, right? It's made for basements, for subfloor for basements when you're gonna finish off a basement. And so basically what it does is it gives me a little spring on my feet, saves my knees a lot. It went in very, very easily. It's just, like I said, all tongue and grooved, just put it in really, really simply. And then I milled up some treated lumber on the edges where the car goes, and then put silicone underneath so that any slush from the Minnesota winters, right? Because for whatever reason, Minnesota garages don't seem to have drain tiles, floor drains. So get a lot of slush. So to keep that from going under, I built up an edge there, and so I have a squeegee. And I just, squeegee everything out with. So my space stays nice and clean. I painted it a nice light color. So again, more light. But when I retired, I decided to upgrade all of my tools as well. So I went from a 6-inch joiner to an 8-inch with a helical head. I went from an old Grizzly bandsaw to this new Laguna here, which I have, on a nice roller stand so I can roll it right out. The other thing about, of course, having a garage shop is I also have to deal with some of the other household items, such as these lovely recycling bins. But I've figured out a way to make that work. They just take up that little bit of space here, and I can roll this out when I need it. It's on the air duct over there with a blast gate on it. so I can turn that on when I need to. I also picked up a couple of Festool. I don't know how many of you use Festool items. I only have the sander, the random orbit sander, and the smaller domino joiner. But man, oh man, it's like cheating when it comes to mortise and tenons and joining things together. And even when I'm putting together tabletops, you know, and you know, because I don't have a big wide belt sander, right? So you have to get the tops as close as you can, right? So you're only planing just a little bit, hand planing off or sanding. These things are so dialed in that, you know, if you put the dominoes instead of biscuits, they're much more rigid. They hold it a lot better. I really like how those work, and it really mates up boards for tabletops really well. So I keep this always plugged in. I have it plugged in back behind there, ready to use. I always have my dust collector on it, and then I just have to put in the appropriate tool that I want. And normally when I'm doing my joinery work with the Festool, or I'm doing my rough sanding with the orbit sander, I'm usually doing it right here on my outfeed table / woodworking bench. So that's another thing about working in a garage shop, right, is that you got to make the most of the opportunity since I did and the space you have. So since I didn't get to build my nice, 24 by 30 foot addition, I have this space to work with, which is quite nice, but I use things multiply. So I've never had a true woodworking bench, and I wouldn't call this a true woodworking bench either, but I did make it so that it works as a woodworking bench in some ways. So obviously, I'd say that my place is a hybrid of the mobile base shops like you see on my bandsaw and you'll see on my outfeed table in a minute, but anchored by this center island where most of the milling happens, right? So I've got my cabinet saw, my jet cabinet saw with, I bought the router lift, the Jessam router lift, cast iron table extension there, so I can do my routing over there. I have to put that switch on, so I haven't done that yet. I have my 8-inch joiner, my Powermatic, a really nice one. It's somebody told me a long time ago when I got my 6-inch jointer, they said, you might want to spend the extra couple $100 on the 8-inch because it's going to be worth it. And I should have listened to them, because I'm sure, as you all know, how many 7-inch wide pieces of wood you need to flatten. So the 8-inch is really nice. Bigger is obviously better, but this is helping me. I also upgraded to the helical head with the carbide bits, the square carbide bits. Man, those are awesome. I just had to, I milled up a whole bunch of my deck. So I had a cedar deck and I took up all the boards and put down new treated pine this summer. And I milled up all that cedar down to about 7/8 inch thick, surface 4 sides at that point. And I used my joiner, my planer, and it was awesome. But one of the things that happens there is that it obviously dulls the bits, right? And so if I had a straight knives, that would have been really bad. But with those square carbides on the helical head, man, you just unscrew them a little, twist them, and screw them back, and in 20 minutes I had brand new blades. So that was really awesome. I built this outfeed table out of scrap wood, cherry, and some walnut, and but most of it's actually beech. Because I did buy that. One of the themes I think of my shop that I'll hit on is the idea of frugal functionality. I really like reusing things, and I like to save money when I can. And this beech, which is not terribly expensive. It was like I think $5 a board foot. I mean, it's not very bad, but it's nice and strong. It's soft enough so that if I'm dropping blades on it, it's not damaging it, and it's just an outfeed table. But I made it up like a woodworker bench, and I drilled dog holes in there, and I bought this Veritas quick release woodworker's vise. I really like the quick release feature. You just flip this little thing down here, and then it activates the screw. But if I want to change the size real fast, I can just flip that up and slide that right in. So that's actually a really cool feature I like. I also got this Veritas holdfast, right, which I saw on one of the other videos that somebody had too. And when you put these in, it goes down like a normal holdfast, but then you can screw it down for making it stronger and really tight, and it really holds things well. But what I also did is I put 3/4 holes along the apron of the bench at the exact same level as the rods for this. So then I can put a board down here, resting here and resting here, so that I can edge joint it with my hand planer, with my hand planes. Obviously, it's a little limited. It's not like a Rubo bench where you can, lower the edge and do a really wide board. I mean, if I had a really wide board, I'd be way up here. But, for most of the things that I'm doing that are 8 inches or thereabouts or less, this is really nice if I want to use a hand plane on a long board. So I really like this. I also use, got this from Mike Pekovich in Fine Woodworking, right? He's got a lot of good ideas. But my plane stop is just a simple couple pieces of scrap that go in here. And so when I'm hand planing a board, it stops it right there. And it's wood, so makes it nice and safe for my blades. And I made the base of the table as well. Yep, that's just poplar. A poplar, nice beefy double trestle design. It's got rails on the top and the bottom. Two posts there and a nice beefy base. So it's super solid. And to make it even more solid so that it's not moving around, I actually screwed it. I actually lag bolted through the angle iron that holds the fence on the back of the table saw. I lag bolted up through that so that this is now bolted to this. So it stays nice and stable. So that's not going anywhere. So moving along, one of the things that I had trouble with and just didn't really have a good solution for was what to do with like all my hand tools, right? Not just for this, but for other things, wrenches and screwdrivers and socket sets and whatnot. So I went the easy route and I just bought one of these bad boys, which I like because it's got plugs in it and a USB thing so I can plug in my phone and my AirPods, and then I've got plenty of storage here for drill bits and files and basic cutting things and my hammers and big things, and I got some room here for spare router stuff, and there's all my sockets, and then I have my measuring and kind of angles and squares and various things in there. So this is really nice. I've got a lot of unused space in there still, so that's awesome. I like to use that quite a bit. I got this. I used to use, back in the day, when I first started doing woodworking, and I started doing woodworking in about 1998, and I learned what I learned primarily from good old Norm Abrams, and but I made mortises with the old drill and chisel, thing that we probably have all done at some point or another. And I found that I didn't use a drill press all that much after that. When I'll show you I just got a hollow chisel mortiser, of course. But a friend of mine was getting rid of this, so he can't give up free tools. So I took this. I think I've used it twice in the last year that I got it, so it just kind of sits here over in the edge. Got to have a chair in the shop, right? So you can sit down and enjoy yourself a little bit. This actually was here when I moved into this house. The previous owner had this kind of 2x4 cheap little bench. And like I say, I don't like throwing things away. I like to be frugal and use it. So I find this to be the nice kind of miscellaneous, take care of rough stuff and hold all my miscellaneous stuff type of thing. But I do have my little pancake air compressor there. And honestly, this is probably kind of silly, but this little thing here, this retractable air hose holder, I got about a year ago. One of the best purchases ever. Oh my gosh, this thing is so handy to have. So the big thing that I really invested in other than the floor, but the big thing I invested in when I redid the shop, which, man, boy, I wish I had done this a long time ago, as many of you, I'm sure, who have dust collection systems know what a difference this has made. So I went through Oneida and got their 5 horsepower system here, and they've got a great little program where if you buy the stuff from them, they'll design it, and you give them the layout of your shop and the measurements and where your tools are, they'll design the ductwork for you, which is great. And of course, you know, you buy the ducks from them. So, I mean, it's not like they don't have a, you know, skin in the game for that, but but it's super. So that was a really easy process. They sent me everything with the schematics of how to do it and all the pieces labeled, you know, and marked. And so it was really, really easy to do. I installed all of this and all this ductwork in a day and a half or so. And wow, it's just huge. I love it. So I've got a 55-gallon drum on it, and I have it on rollers. So a lot of my stuff I've got on these awesome, you know, locking rollers with that soft rubber. And so whenever this fills up, it lights up right here, flashes at me, lets me know it's nice and full because it's got a sensor. And I just roll this off into the yard and kind of dump it out there. I've kind of got a big mountain of sawdust out there right now. So at some point I'm not gonna be able to do that anymore, but at the moment that's what I do. So moving along. Oh yeah, and then of course that's the big stuff, but of course the fines, you know, you got to have your air filtration there. I actually use this as well for heating in the sense that I will pull this back and let the air just kind of blow, so that when I've got my heater, which we'll get to in a minute, that is up on the ceiling, you know, blowing hot air down, this just kind of circulates it around the place while keeping the air nice and clean. So that's really nice to do. Then this table I built specifically for my thickness planer, so that I've got a nice outfeed table at the same level, obviously, as the outfeed bench there. But then, of course, it's a lot of space, so I have drawers in it. And again, frugal functionality here. This is just plywood handles, you know, that I just pulled together out of scrap. I have my lay jig in here, which I really only use, I mean, it's really cool, these jigs, but I really only use it when I'm making lots of drawers, right? Because setup just takes a while, because you got to test it and all that stuff. So if you're only making like a few dovetail drawers, but if I'm making like a cabinet that has a lot of drawers in it, so I'll use that a fair bit. I keep all my router stuff in here. I have my hand planes in here. One of the things that's on my project list for the winter is to build a hand tool cabinet for the wall. You know, again, Mike Pekovich from Finne Woodworking has a really nice design for that. So I think I'm gonna use those plans. Got my hollow chisel mortises in there, and my handy dandy Craig jig. You know, I know that they make bigger Craig jigs than this, but this simple, straightforward one that just clamps to something, I haven't found its limit yet. So that's all I use. What else do I got? Then I got just some miscellaneous stuff here. Here's the kind of graveyard of the biscuit joiner, because once I got that Festool Domino joiner, I really never use that anymore. So if I'm desperate for some money and I want to buy some wood, maybe I'll sell that on Facebook Marketplace or something. I upgraded to the DeWalt. I had the DeWalt, this is the DeWalt DW735. I had the old one for probably, you know, 15, 20 years. The 2-blade version, did all my woodworking on that for a long time, and it worked fine. But I decided to get this one because you could get you could again get the helical carbide blade, and it's amazing. I love it. So it's simple. It's so-called portable because you can pick it up. It's pretty heavy. So it just has a permanent spot here. This is my Powermatic 8-inch joiner. I like it. I was thinking of getting they have the new ones now that have the, I forget what they call them, but it's like the trapezoidal, I think, way of adjusting them. But that was like $1,000 extra. So I just got the old kind that you lift up, and it works really well. So I don't really have a problem with that.
Co-planar adjustment?
Co-planar adjustment. Thank you, sir. That is exactly what it's called. Okay, so if we spin back around this way, I do have a little bit of natural light, which is nice. Of course, then not much in the winter because we just don't have much sun. I'm just working on kind of doing a little bit of touch-up finishing on this little piece that I did a while ago. It's a floating top bench with my version of the cabriole leg. I'm not good enough to do the nice carved claw foot, but I decided to try and make a more angular one, which I kind of like. But this is my setup table, and because it's a small shop, I have my setup table on a pretty beefy 2x4 bench, but it's on these wheels that you can, flip up and lock down so that the thing can lock down when I want to, but I can move this all the way around my shop if I want to, if I need to get around to both sides of it, to do my finishing or clamping or whatever. I can move it. So I really like having this here, and all my clamps are right there. I'm working on some new clamp holders for my pipe clamps as well, but for now this works really well. And this table here is actually my old desk from when I was a marketing executive. So when I retired, I beat my sword into a plowshare and use this now as my finishing table. I got a couple drawers in it for various things that I might want, and that works really well. So I like having that in the corner, and it's nice when I'm finishing having it by the window, because then I can kind of see, you get a lot more things that you can see. So just recently did this, even though this looks very old, but again, remember, frugal functionality. This is all just scrap plywood, dadoed in, these little drawers for my sandpaper. I really like that. That helps a lot. And all of the stuff over here, except for this middle piece, which I built specifically for my chop saw. But this obviously is an old desk. This over here it was the bottom of an entertainment center in my basement when I put in a wood stove last year. I pulled this out. This was the cabinets that go above that went above that desk. And then that big cabinet over there with the open face, I'm going to build doors for, but that was above the entertainment center. So I did a bunch of stuff in the house when I retired, and I just took it out, and I love reusing things, right? Free stuff. So this is where I keep all my, I keep my glues and some wedges and all my old plans and things like that. I have a lot of space down here that's unused yet, so I've got a lot more. I got to buy more stuff, obviously, to put in there. And then I just used simple aluminum, angle irons, aluminum ones, planar to this fence. So that's my, keeps everything nice and straight and works really well for me. So nothing fancy, nothing special. Doesn't look, super purpose made, but it does the job really nice. So that's what I like about it. Over here, I found this to be a nice blade storage for me. Just again, simple. Couple pieces of plywood screwed to a piece of plywood on the back and then screwed to the wall with angled cuts. I slide my blades in there and they hold very nice. I got my dado blades and even my tiny little handheld power, battery powered saw blades in there as well. And I'm sure all of you do this, but this is the greatest thing in the world, having your dado register board, so if I have my recipes for the different widths of dados all on here, hanging from here, so that when I need to put something into a dado or into a rabbit, I can just find which one fits here for the piece I'm trying to do, and then I know exactly what blades to use and how many spacers and all that kind of stuff. And I told you I have a wood stove downstairs. That's a great thing to have when you're a woodworker because you got lots of scrap, right? So this is my scrap bin. Clearly, I need to light my wood stove because I'm overflowing. So sheet storage is always kind of an issue, right? When you're in a smaller shop too. What do you do with sheet storage? I never liked just having it sitting and angling because I always felt like it kind of bent a little bit. So I have this little bump out on my wall here, right? My wall goes back just a bit. So I made this container thing and I put it on wheels. And so I can just slide it right out. And I have easy access to all of my sheet goods. I'm not using up a lot of space, but I still have plenty of room to pull my sheet goods in and out. It's kind of a mess right now because I've been making a lot of stuff, so I have a lot of smaller pieces. But what I did was I put it on a rotating wheel here, but then I have two more wheels back there that I took a string and a Sharpie and drew the arc of where it would go from this corner, and then I mounted the wheels along so that they'd go on that arc. So they're fixed wheels, but they're angled to go right on that arc, and it's just really smooth. And then this one swings around so I can just lock it down. And then I have my cutoff bin here. I found this design a long time ago from somebody, probably in Fine Woodworking or one of the woodworking magazines. And it's just nice. I got 4 sections with 3 different size spaces in it. So all my cutoffs here, I find it very hard to, I know I have scrap there, but I find it hard to get rid of even small pieces of wood if they're pretty. You know, there's got to be something you're going to use them for. And again, I put them on wheels. I really, really do like these 4-inch, soft rubber wheels that lock and spin. They're just so handy for just about everything. And then my wood storage is right here. One thing I'll say is that when we moved here from Pennsylvania, this is actually my third move to Minnesota by choice. I like the state. We moved in 2011, but we lived in Pennsylvania for about 8 years. And Pennsylvania is the source of about 90% of the American cherry that is used in woodworking in the world, right? So it's all right there, right? And I had a guy half a mile from me, around the corner from my house, who had a bandsaw mill and did a lot of milling of wood. He had tons of cherry, and he sold it for, I know it was 10 years ago, but still, it's a good price. He sold it for $250 a board foot. So I brought about 1,000 board feet back with me, and that bottom shelf is all I have left. So I still have some left to do with stuff, but if you see any of the woodworking in my house, if we take any pictures of it, you'll notice there's a lot of cherry. But I like cherry. Cherry is a great wood to work with. But what I did for my solution here was again, frugal stuff, is I just took 4x4 posts and cut a kerf in it, a saw blade kerf in it, to fit these basically 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16 inch angle irons, and so I hammered it in there and then drilled a hole and put a lag screw through to hold it in there, and these are just strong as all heck. So I mean, and relatively cheap. The one problem is that they're a little sharp on the bottom, and my head has encountered them once or twice. So I need to find a solution. I need to cut an angle in it or something. But yeah, so this is my wood. All of that up there is what's left of my deck that I milled down in cedar. Granted, it has, a couple of screw holes in it every now and then, but I made an entire set of Adirondacks around my fire pit outside, and a couple of cornhole boards for my son's wedding that was just a couple weeks ago. So that was fun. But I have a lot of that left. So hey, if you're getting rid of a cedar deck and you don't want to use the wood, I'll take it. Just get in contact with me. So the only other challenge that I had with this shop is that I have to make room for these motorcycles. My son just got married, but I told him he could keep his motorcycle here, for the winter. I'm a nice dad. And my motorcycle. And so I had to keep 2 channels open. And actually that works really well for me, because I just back them out and then move them right up. And it's the space I need to walk around, and it holds the motorcycle as well. So I think I've found a good way to, get things arranged while also having a nice big open shop and be able to move things around. I think the only other thing that I would speak to is the heating. Obviously, Minnesota, it's a garage, right? It is finished. So there's drywall on the walls. There was drywall on the walls when I moved here, which one would assume means that they're insulated, right? I assume that, at least, until last year. And I remember I've been woodworking in here for 9 or 10 years. Last year, I came in here in the morning, one of those really, really cold days, and I noticed there was frost on the bottom of my wall. And I drilled into it, and there was no insulation. So I've been heating my garage. So if any of you have stock in Excel, you can thank me for the returns you're getting, because I paid way too much for the heating, apparently. So what I did, if you might notice all the drywall marks on patches on the wall, is just earlier this fall I blew in insulation. So now I have insulation. But what I do is I start out my heating, and this is another nice thing about having this on a roller, is I have this little bullet heater that I kickstart the place with. So I turn that on for about 10-15 minutes, which quickly gets the heat up in the house or in the garage. And then I turn it off, and propane, believe it or not, is still relatively inexpensive. They haven't raised it too much recently. But then once that's going, right up there, right above you, is a big industrial electric heater. I don't have natural gas here, or a good way to get natural gas in here, so I don't have like one of those, garage dogs or whatever they're called, heat dogs. But I got that back when I was in Pennsylvania, and I had a big, about a 17 foot by 50 foot shop, and that was what heated it. So I just wired up. I wired up in here. It's it's 220. It uses a fair amount, but if it's just keeping it at a certain temperature, it's not so bad. So in the wintertime, this is, with this floor being insulated now, and having that in the shop, it actually is nice and cozy in here. So this is my happy place, and yeah, that's my shop. I think what I'm going to do next is extend that a little bit. I'm going to build something purpose-built, or else I'll find something on Facebook Marketplace, somebody getting rid of kitchen cabinets, and extend off that to the wall a little bit. Put up some better clamp storage, and then make some use of my walls. And then I got to get some stuff to fill the empty space that I have. So, and I do. Yep, I have some of my jigs up there. Wall's a great place for those, obviously. And again, frugal functionality, right? I mean, this is just my box joint jig. It's just 2x4s and plywood, and this is for cutting splines in a frame, and that's my tapered leg jig. So pretty easy stuff, inexpensive, and works really well. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, if you want to see a little bit of the work that I did. That little lady up above the window there, I did art shows for a year back in 2007, I think, and did the Gold Coast Art Fair in Chicago, the Miracle Mile in Chicago, and a couple of big ones in Pennsylvania. It's fun to do, and I sold a fair amount of stuff, but it wasn't enough to really raise a family on, so I only did it for 1 year. But I made some sculptural stuff like that, which I call my Narcissister line, because I have some mirrors inside that have two ladies that look kind of like that, but standing up around a mirror, so hopefully you get the name. Anyways, that's some of the stuff I did, and again, that's just a piece that I'm on the table that I'm just waxing up right now, and I think that's it for my shop. I have a little bit of something down here. I guess we can show real quick. So got a little bit more space. I got some full extension glides on this so I can get to my hollow chisel mortiser, but I'll be honest with you, after getting that domino jig, unless it's a decorative mortise and tenon, like a through tenon or something, man, that domino jig works wonders. So it's kind of like cheating. But anyways, so that's it. Thanks for letting me show you my shop.
Maybe some aren't monitoring the chat, so I'll try to go over those. One was what was the sensor in the dust collector? And Drew said it's essentially just a visual sensor in the bottom side of the lid that you set the level of sensitivity for. So it goes off a little lower or higher in the barrel, and it's from Oneida, the sensor. And then somebody asked what brand is Drew's miter saw. He answered that it was Bosch, that requires no clearance behind it. And then somebody asked where did he get his wheels from, and he said he thought they were from Woodcraft. So that was it for questions, and like I said, Drew answered most of them in the chat, but I thought I'd go over them just for folks who aren't monitoring the chat.
Hey, I think I'm up next. So Dave Castiglione is our next tour guide of his amazing shop. He built the shop in order to build the house, and he'll tell you more about that. I'll say things about him that he doesn't say. He is an incredible creative problem solver. He's a woodworker for sure, but you'll hear, that's not what he's done for his living. He has a wide range of skills and knowledge that you'll hear about. This is technically a hobby shop, but it's really impressive. And it's basically capable of delivering on anything that Dave can imagine. So Dave, take it away.
Okay, hello. My name is Dave Castiglione. This is my shop. This is a hobby shop, so I am an engineer by trade. I work at 3M developing respirators. So if you've ever used one of our respirators, I've probably had a hand in it because I've been doing it now for about 30 years there. This shop was a new build, It was started in 2013. It was a shop and a house built on this property. We've got 10 acres outside of Hudson, Wisconsin, and the shop was built first. It is 80 by 32, so it's 32 wide by 80 long, and it is a large shop, much bigger than the previous one I had. And it's divided into two sections. The front 30 feet is where we are right now, and this is mostly for things like metalworking and working on cars and stuff like that. And then the back 50 feet is really the wood shop area. Construction is, this is a slab on grade, but it was done with frost-protected shallow footings, so there is insulation below the slab and outside the slab as well. It's approximately 5 inches thick, and the edges are thickened for footings, for the structural footings out at the edges. And then we also added hydronic tubing to the pour, so that there's water tubing basically in the floor, PEX tubing for the heating system. So it's radiant floor heating throughout the whole shop area. So the shop is fully insulated, essentially just like the house. It's I think, 25-ish on the walls, because they're solid foam essentially. And then the ceiling is blown into your typical like R48, R50 that we have around here. And that's the basic construction. The house and the shop are constructed essentially the same, but the shop was done first so that we could use the shop to help finish building the house. And this is basically what I do outside of work. I'm, like I said, I'm an engineer at work, but I do all the house construction. I did everything from clearing the land with the help of a couple of friends to designing and building and everything, including doors, cabinets, all the finish work, most of the interior work myself. So done a lot of it myself, and this is where it all happens. Okay, like I said, the front shop area is a lot of it's metalworking and car work, and I built this table, started from a used table that I picked up for cheap, and then modified it and beefed it up to be a welding table. So I've got, it's just a 1/4 inch top on it, but it's a good long area. I had to keep it narrow to fit in between. Normally the truck goes right where we're filming, and then you can see the tractor on the other side. But I added, to be able to do wider things, like the railings that I did for the house, I added some extensions. So there's a set of receivers on here, which is just like what you'd find on a truck hitch. And I can put in these plates that I made, and then there's filler strips in between. So I can extend this out. It's about 28 inches right now, and I can extend it out. I think it's somewhere around 40 inches or so at the full width. So that allows me to do some work on bigger items, as long as I obviously take the truck out of the way on this side. But these receivers also allow me to do other things as well. I've got a couple of them on the other side. So when I need my vise, slide that in, and I can snug it up so that it doesn't move around with these screw handles that I've got on the side, and use it as needed, put it away when you don't need it, so it helps keep things out of the way. And you can put multiple things in here. This is below the table I've got a lot of storage. There's a shelf down there, and I use that to hang the grinders, and I've got a few of those set up for different things. So we'll be set up for a wire wheel or a cutoff wheel or just general grinding. And then over on the other side's a rack for all the clamps, just a piece of angle iron, aluminum angle iron that everything hangs off of and keeps it out of the way and in a nice, convenient place to grab things. So for metalworking, I've got a bandsaw, which is both a horizontal and vertical one. Right now it's set up for the horizontal for cutting long stock. So I've got the stands that I use to support the work on both sides, and you can cut pieces to length very easily with this. You can also stand it up vertically if you need to cut something on a horizontal saw, which is sometimes helpful. It's nice to have the ability to do that. I use it from time to time. Most of the time, though, it stays in this mode just for cutting pieces down. And then the welder itself, this is actually a surprisingly industrial welder for a home shop. I managed to find this at an auction, and I mean, that's true of a lot of things. Some things are used, some things are new, and so there's a variety of ways that I've acquired things over the years. This was a great find at an auction, and it is really an industrial level welder that's capable of doing stick welding, MIG welding with the wire feeder. You can see the wire feeder up here. I've also got it set up to be able to do TIG welding depending on which mode I put it in. So I can do DC TIG for steel or stainless steel. I can't do aluminum because I don't have AC on this, but it is, like I say, a very much heavy duty industrial unit, and allows a lot of flexibility for a lot of things here. So the last big item I've got here is a Bridgeport, and for those of you familiar with it, you'll know what that is. For everybody else, it's a milling machine. And if you're not familiar with it, the best corollary that most people would be familiar with is kind of like a drill press. So there's a spindle that turns, and you can put various things into it, like a drill chuck. So you can put drill bits into it to be able to drill items, or there's also collets, kind of like a router collet for holding mill bits that you can use then to carve away material in typically steel, metal, aluminum, steel, whatever. You can also use it for wood. I haven't done it myself, but I know some people who have, to be able to route channels and things like that very accurately. It's nice to have this level of control, but basically it allows you to do a lot more flexible things with metal to be able to cut and mill things to shape that you'd want to. So here's kind of a general overview of the main shop area, the wood shop. So back here is a lot of storage and clamps and the workbench. You can see the edge sander coming into view there. And then the chop saw station's the next item. Up on the walls, dust collection, we'll talk about that a bit later. And then you can see that the dust collector is hidden way back in the corner. Table saw and a little assembly table on the outfeed for that. Then lumber storage in the back and pallet racking. And then you can see the door in the back, there's a little spray booth that I have set up. And then most of the rest of this is kind of our main tools. So there's the wide belt sander, which you see off to the right at the moment there, and then bandsaw joiner planer, and spinning around, there's a lathe back in the corner, and then back up to the front with storage and an assembly bench. And this assembly bench is one that I used a lot for making doors. I had started originally making doors. I was using the outfeed table on the table saw, and that was a problem because it really wasn't quite big enough for doors. It wasn't long enough. So I was struggling with that at first, and then decided, well, I needed to make a bigger table. So this is basically a 4x8 sheet, just set at a nice height for assembly work. But this is how everything always goes. It's like there was a bunch of stuff in the corner that was just out of the way at the time just to get things moving. So I was like, well, if I'm going to put a table, where am I going to put it? Well, I'll put it over here. Well, I got to get rid of all this stuff. Well, where am I going to put all this stuff? Well, I need some shelves for that. So then everything starts to cascade, and it's like, well, okay. So go to Menards, get some shelves, get some bins, start putting stuff away, get it out of the way, and then you can build the table. And then this worked out great because it was perfect size for making a door. Good access, but yet not so far to reach that you can't reach across as needed to be able to get to everything. So this, and since then, obviously, it's been a fantastic table for just about anything at a nice height. So the main work area really is right in the center of the shop. You've got the table saw and the outfeed table, and this is set up so that if I want to put the sled on here for cross-cutting, I can do that, and they still go right through, without interfering with the outfeed tables. But then I can put this in place to open up the space for some bigger parts as well. And now that I've got the other assembly table that I talked about, that gets used a lot more for assembly work, but I still have the ability to do stuff here. But then the nice thing is to be able to go from here right directly over here to the joiner, so you can go back and forth for edge joining boards, ripping and edge joining, and obviously then same thing as you get over here between face joining boards and running through the planer. This works real well back and forth. You can work yourself right around the two of these, using the tables to put things either over on the table saw or over on the assembly table. And then eventually the final step that everything comes to is the wide belt sander that is really a godsend for finishing up boards and getting things ready for final work. Everything, I typically run 100, 120 grit, something about around that in here, and that's good enough to clean up all the planer marks and basically get everything nice and smooth. From there I move on to typically 180 or 120 on the random orbit sander, and then into final finishing, 120 to 220 essentially, and on from there. So this has really been, it is one of the nicest things for getting boards nice and even and consistent, and a smooth finish on them to get ready to move on to finishing. So this is one of those shop aids that I created, kind of like the assembly table back here. It's sort of a rolling stand for plans, and I've got drawers where I keep things like bits and small drills and pencils and whatnot, and measuring marking tools, so I can have this handy, and it rolls around so that you can put it anywhere you want. And then the table's kind of like a drafting table where I made these little blocks out of from the mill to be able to adjust the height of it. So if you want, or adjust the angle of it, I should say. So you can tip it up more or less as you like, but basically you can put paper up to what's called architectural C size, which is 22 by 34 on this without it really overhanging any. So you can get good sized drawings onto this as is, and being mobile, you can bring it around where you want it, or if it's in your way, you can scoot it out of the way. So it's quite a handy item, and makes the drill press was always the place where everything landed, and so now I've got a better shot at using the drill press, although you can still see it's still got stuff all over it. So workbench corner, I've got a cabinet with a lot of screws, drill bits, bits and bobs like that. A lot of the manuals for the tools get stuffed in there. And then the workbench itself is the very first thing I actually made some 25 years ago in my old shop. And it's maple on top, but there's a couple of layers of plywood below that to give it some extra thickness. And that was really a cost-saving measure, just to use less hardwood at the time. And it showed everybody learns about wood movement one way or the other, and this would be mine, that there's cracks that have developed between the boards on the top as the maple moves over time, but the plywood below it does not move the same. So it wasn't like I didn't know it, but it really showed it dramatically to you after a year or so of sitting around. But great bench in general for a lot of work, dog holes all over it so that you can clamp things on top, your basic record vise on the side, and then a twin screw vise on the end from Lee Valley, which is also a very handy item for grabbing larger things. And then I made a couple of drawer units underneath that holds a lot of things like chisels and marking tools and stuff like that. Here's basically a look at the ductwork up above. Ceilings are 13 feet high, so all of this was done from scaffolding and tall ladders when it was put in. It is really nice having the high ceilings. The ability to swing a board vertically is a godsend. The dust collection system is one of the unique things that I've got here, and it's something that I put together a number of years ago. It's a semi-automated system. You see systems out there for sale that will have current sensors on each machine, so you put something around the power cord, and as soon as you turn on the machine, it turns on the dust collector and opens a gate. I set up something a little differently. I wanted to be able to control it myself so that I could open a gate or multiple gates and still leave them running after things were done for a little bit, so that you got the last of the dust and the chips out of the way, and it didn't stop too short on you. So I came up with a system where I have controls at each of the machines, and so the green button will start the dust collection system and open the blast gate. The red button stops it for this zone, And then the white button is a close all gates. So if you have multiple gates open, you can hit any white button anywhere and it shuts everything off at once. So we'll show you this operating. You'll see the gate go up here. So it's electronics and pneumatics together. There's a pneumatic cylinder. Most of this stuff was bought through places like Surplus Center and a lot of the online surplus places for getting what are essentially industrial controls really cheap, things that were both used or taken, surplus inventory kind of things. So that's how a lot of this was put together, which is what made it cost effective. Otherwise, this would have been extraordinarily expensive to do all of this stuff, but it works pretty slick. And the setup on these is it's just aluminum angle iron that I've cut into a couple of pieces for clearance, and we'll show you a picture of that here in a second, and you'll be able to see how that works. So here's a little close up on one of the blast gates, and you can see how the mechanism is made. And here I'll launch it for you. So these are the controls for the dust collection system. The gray electrical box is where all the circuitry is, and I think I've got a still photo that hopefully they'll splice in here that will show some of the circuitry inside. But basically right now it's a mess of wires connecting everything together. The wooden box with the clear cover on it is where all the pneumatics are. And again, these were surplus industrial controls that the box tells a solenoid to open the air valve, and it opens the air valve and kicks open the blast gate. And then when you shut it off, it sends air to the other side and closes the blast gate. And pretty simple logic, but like I've shown, it's kind of really handy to have the ability to do that on each tool. And then for an example of a tricky dust collection, miter saws are always a problem because they take up a lot of area. Of course, you have to deal with the swing to both sides of being able to cover all this space with a slide compound miter saw. And so what I ended up doing, there's essentially a furnace duct in the back, which would be like what you have in your floor for your hot air furnace. And I kind of funneled things down to that. And then the pipe goes down below and then comes up top here. And then I also added a hose to the dust collection port on the saw itself. I don't think that does all that much compared to the main one behind it. But it does a decent job. Anything that's in the air does get sucked right down to it. A lot of stuff gets left over, the heavier stuff falls out, but occasionally that's just a matter of sweeping it into the duct, and it goes away real quick that way. If you wanted to improve on this a little better, the enclosure is key to keeping this contained. You could add some curtains or something up front, like the strip curtains you see in industrial refrigeration, like in a grocery store where they've got the walk-in type coolers. That would help concentrate the airflow a little better, and I think you'd get less fallout in the back. But it does do a real nice job taking out the airborne dust. You really notice the difference even from one cut if you don't turn it on. You can see the cloud of dust around it, but if you turn it on, none of that. So it is pretty effective and seems like a pretty decent way to make it work. So here's the dust collector itself. It is a 5-horse unit, which I upgraded when I moved into this shop from what I had previously, which was a 2 or 3 horsepower one. It comes with a cyclone and the filters built into it. So these are all part of the unit itself. So these 2 filter cartridges back here, when they collect dust, it dumps down into the bottom into these plastic bags, which you can empty separately, but the bulk of everything goes into the bin at the bottom of the cyclone. And then there's the garage door, which is right next to it right here. So basically I roll the bin out back and dump it out into the edge of the woods, essentially, where we are. So that's what happens for dust collection. And then hiding back here in the corner is also the panel saw, which normally is a little better exposed. You can just bring plywood right in from the side, do whatever you need for cutting it, and then of course the outfeed saw and the table saw makes it a lot easier to handle larger pieces of plywood as well when you need to do it over there. So this one is actually a full 5-foot model, so you can put Baltic birch onto it, not just regular 4x8 sheets, but those odd European 5x5s that we get sometimes, back when Youngblood existed. Right now where I'm at on the house is I'm doing a lot of the final trim work, and so it's a lot of just joining and planing boards over and over again. White oak for everything in the house, and as you may know if you've ever dealt with white oak, it's quite hard. And so planing the boards down requires a fair amount of effort. Now I had a power feeder on my shaper back in the corner, and I hadn't been using the shaper very much, so I said, hey, why don't I be able to come up with a way to mount this out here so that I can use the power feeder to help feed boards. And basically I just put this out so that it swings into place, and you secure it down, and this helps feed the boards quite well. It's only a 1/4 horse, so it's not like a full industrial feeder where it will really do everything by itself. You do have to help it along a little bit, but for the most part, it really it helps a lot on holding the boards down to the outfeed table to make sure that everything stays flat, and really helps the feeding quite a bit. The mount that I made back here, if you want to swing back around, again, this is from the metalwork side of the shop, steel tubing and steel plates. The hardest part of this was trying to figure out how to mount it to the base of the joiner and get it in the right place so that the power feeder was in the right spot to do what it needed to do, and had the reach to then swing out of the way also. So here I've got a spray booth in the back corner. It's about 10 by 12. I have lights set up sort of like an automotive spray booth so that you can get lights down low if you want to get a good raking light looking at your finish to make sure that you've got everything covered well. So I've got the lights down low for that, and then the lights higher up to basically cover everything. I set a fan into this, so it's made essentially like a window to the house, but it's just a piece of the wall that is cut out. And as I mentioned earlier, it's structural insulated panel, so that is essentially what this is a chunk of structural insulated panel where I added edges to it so that I can pop this thing in and out. So what happens is you take out the wedge and the bar, then this gets lifted off, move it right over here into the handy dandy shelf, and then you can take the fan, lift that into place, and then finally the filters, pre-filters to help keep the fan a little cleaner and knock down any overspray from going outside. So you do that, and then this just plugs right in. Instant spray booth. Okay, this is the heating system for the shop. It covers everything. So it's, like I said, radiant floor heating. You can see the manifold in the floor right here, which is, there are 5 zones. Each is 300 feet of tubing going through this side of the shop. And then there's a similar manifold on the other side, which is 4 zones of 300 feet each going into the floor on that side. Each side is zoned separately with its own pump, and the pump controller is right here. The thermostats are out in the rooms, which control each side of the 2 rooms separately. This looks complicated. In reality, this stuff's all purchased. These manifolds are pre-made. You can get them from various suppliers online, and so you don't have to put all of these individual pieces together. And of course, they do a really nice job of getting everything cleanly soldered and leak tight and tested and all that. The heater itself is a tankless water heater. So this is just a regular domestic tankless water heater. I've got air supply. If you look up top, that is both supply and exhaust. They go through the same opening. The supply is on the outside, the exhaust is on the inside. And works pretty well overall. The thing that I found about tankless water heaters, because we also have them for the house, is that they are very, very sensitive to hard water. We have hard water here, and it has destroyed heaters already because we started things up before we had the water softeners in place. This one is on its second heater in the space of about 9 years as a result of the hard water that was in there. So that is, they don't make that abundantly clear how sensitive they are to it, but if you have any thoughts of getting a tankless water heater for any use, whether it's for heating or for domestic hot water, you've got to make sure that you've got softened water, or you're going to have big problems with them, and very quickly in a lot of cases. Talk a little bit about some of the wood that I've used. The first main wood that I got for the bulk of the cabinets, and especially the doors, was from Horizon Lumber out of Western Pennsylvania. They do a lot of exporting to Europe, and in this particular case, they had a wine barrel maker in France that wanted a bunch of quarter-sawn white oak in 8-quarter thickness for making barrels. And they wanted to try different woods from around the country because they wanted to see what the different flavors they would get from the different woods based on where they were grown. So they had placed this big order with them, and they had sent off all this wood, but they had a lot of leftovers. And they actually took what really were veneer quality logs and cut them into 8-quarter stock, which is very unusual, as you can well know. And this is what was left over from that, or a chunk of what was left over from that. And you can see the names on the numbers on them as well. So these were individually numbered. This would be from log 941 slab 05 from it, and you can see here 941-09. So all of these were sequentially numbered, so you could restack the logs from each of these, and the lumber was just so perfectly clear and pristine. I actually used, they had boards 11-12 inches wide at 8-quarter thickness that were totally clear, and I would resaw those for the panels for the doors, so the panels were actually resawn 8-quarter book matched for a lot of the early doors. This got me through, I had 23 doors, and it got me through about around 15 of the doors. And then the remainder of that, I had to go find more lumber, and that's where this stuff with the black ends comes in. We went down, a friend and I went down to Frank L. Miller Lumber in southern Indiana. They're on the Ohio-Indiana border, and they are basically the #1 supplier of quarter-sawn white oak in the country, probably in the world for that matter, and got a whole bunch of stock from them. So the 8-quarter that you see down here with the black ends was from them. And then I've got also 4-quarter and 5-quarter, which is mostly being used for trim in the house. And while it is good quality lumber, it is amazing to see the difference between the original lumber that I had from Horizon and this. I do find myself having to break open boards on the joiner first to get a good look at them and find out where are the defects that I can't see in the rough lumber, so that I can work around them for trim. I think it's the state of lumber these days. It just is getting to be more and more like that. But it is disappointing after having such pristine stock to start with in the beginning.
Let me look in the chat here, Mike. Oops, I can't find it for some reason. Here we go. I don't really see any questions. The only one I saw was that somebody asked how he moved to Bridgeport into the shop, and Dave answered that the next door neighbor had a forklift to help him get it in the shop. Other than that, I don't see any other questions for Dave.
Okay, great. So that's going to do it for tonight's show. Big thank you to all the shop tour participants: Oz, Bruce, Drew, Dave, you guys did an excellent job. Tours turned out great. Y'all have great shops. Big thanks to the program committee members that did all the hard work to get these recorded for us. So thank you to Matt, Dan Burks, Dan Warner, and Amelia Kennedy. So thank you. And that's going to do it for tonight. Next month, we'll be at Tom Casper's shop, and he's going to give us some tips and tricks on the card scraper. So please join us for that. Thank you.